In this video, we will focus on laying out the UI for the game, which is a 4x4 grid of cards, and the cards are randomly sorted between each game. The first thing we'll do is go into the app component and add a div with a class name of grid. I don't want to focus much on the CSS here, but if we go into the CSS file, you'll notice it has display grid and uses grid template columns to create 4 evenly spaced columns. I linked a video below if you want to learn more about CSS grid. Now we can add the first piece of state to our component, which are the 16 cards that we want to show in the UI. To generate the card, we're going to need some boilerplate code to reference all of the images in the assets folder. So to handle this, I'm creating a utility function in the utilities directory called shuffle.js. Inside that file, we have a function called shuffle that we will also export as the default. Inside the function, I'm first creating an assets array that contains 8 objects that reference the images in the public directory. You'll notice we have 8 images here, but in the game, we want to show 16 altogether. So for the entire game, we'll need to double the objects in this array. For that, I'm using the spread syntax, and then I'm combining it with the sort method to randomly sort the array every time this function is called. That will give us a random array of objects. Then one extra step I'm doing here for each card is adding a random ID to it. This will be used by React in the next step as we loop over each card. Now back in the app, we can pass that function directly to useState, which we'll call it when the state is first initialized. In the JSX, we can now loop over the cards. We'll do that with map like we've looked at in previous videos. And then one cool trick here is that we can also destructure properties from the card if we want to directly here in the code, like the image ID, and a property called match that we'll look at in the next video. The return value will be a card component that has props for the key, image, selected, and an on-click handler. In this demo, we will define that component in a separate file. It will live in the components directory as card.jsx. Inside of it, we have a card function that will be exported as the default and contains props for, again, the image, selected, and on-click. In the UI, we have a div for card, inside of which contains another div that has a selected class name only when the selected property is truthy. Now in the demo, each card has a front face and back face, which is built with 2 different images. The first image is one of the images in the assets array that we created earlier. Then the second image is the one you see initially, which is the Fireship logo. And that's all there is to it for the UI. If you open up the demo, you should now have an array of cards that look something like this. You might also notice that there's a lot going on with the CSS here. If we go into it, you can see that when we have a selected value, we're showing different animations for the card face and card back. You can accomplish a lot with plain CSS animations when using React, although in a future video, we're going to bring in a library called FramerMotion to tie actual animations to the state of the application. That's a more advanced topic, and my recommendation is to go with CSS animations as your first option, then look into a React animation library if things get too hard to manage. I will also link a CSS animation video below. In the next video, we'll start to make the UI do something interesting.